Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. It is the 12th of the month, which means it is the first challenge over at the CKC blog, and as part of the design team, I try to do as many of the challenges as I can. And this challenge is all about the mood board sneak peek for the kit reveal this month. And our challenge is to use that mood board to inspire a layout. Well, I am going to do that very literally. So let's get started. Here is my counterfeit kit for this month, and if you don't know about my kit builds, I will link you up to that. I am going to basically recreate that mood board with my pattern paper and embellishments, which means this layout is going to be a no photo layout. I'm curious, do you ever do no photo layouts? How do you feel about that? Let me know in the comments below. So I did pop up the mood board on the screen so you can kind of follow along with what I'm trying to do to interpret and recreate this mood board. It has a dark background to it, and the only two papers I have in my kit that are dark are these two, and I'm really reluctant to use them up right away. And I don't usually have that problem. I'm usually okay to just be good to go with working with my papers because they're pretty and I want them in my projects. However, this time I was having an issue, so I did go grab black cardstock from my stash, and I'm going to cut apart pieces of my pattern papers to make up those blocks. And that way I will still have chunks of these pattern papers to mix and match together for other layouts later. So I am starting with those colorful strips, which I am going to reproduce off of that sketch. And then I'm starting with the blocks. I know I'm trying to pick pattern papers that match the main color that you see in the block. So we've got several green blocks. We've got one of the lady with photographs that is in like a field of wheat, which is golden yellow. So I'm going to use this yellow paper for that block. And I am cutting my two big blocks at 4x4, which is going to leave me a nice big border around this edge. And then the smaller blocks I'm cutting down to 2x2. Now, those are going to need to be trimmed even more a little bit later to accommodate the gaps or the gutters in between each of the blocks. So here is kind of where I'm going to get started. I did cut just a few things in the beginning to make sure that this is the direction I want to go, and still trying to decide which pattern papers are going to match up with which blocks in the design. And some of my pattern papers don't quite fit with what's going on in the block, so I am going to have to kind of interpret there a little bit, but I'm doing okay. It's taking me a while, so I'm going to speed you through a lot of this process of deciding on all these blocks. As I'm looking at things, I am showing a little bit of the indecision here and also trying to balance out the pattern papers that I do have. I had this like diagonal line going with the polka dots and the two blue from the bottom left up to the top right. And so I'm trying to fix that kind of very obvious diagonal line. You know, it probably wouldn't have been so obvious once I started embellishing it, but at this stage I'm looking at it going, it feels off. So I am trying to get some balance in here between all of these blocks, and getting at least 3 of each pattern tends to help with that so that you have kind of a triangle shape of these patterns, but that doesn't balance out with the photos. At any rate, this little piece, I decided I could switch that up a little bit because the back side has a kind of a bubbly print on it, which goes better with that yoga print, that yoga picture in the mood board. So that helped kind of break up that diagonal line a little bit, and I do shift things around a little bit. And then once I've got the basic plan, I can trim these blocks down by like 1/8 of an inch on 2 sides, so that when I put the blocks back together, the total trim is 1/4 of an inch for that gutter in between the spaces. That math did take me a little while to get all figured out, but I did it, and often I will think I'm doing okay with my math and then things will go wrong, but this time it went right, so that was nice. And then a little more math to decide where the corner of my first block should start, so that I have even border left and right. I do have even border top and bottom, but some of that space will be filled in with that stripe paper that I started off with, and you'll see that coming up in a little bit. And once I have that starting point, I'm going to use my T-ruler to kind of help keep that top line straight, and then that will make the alignment of all of the rest of the blocks go well. So here I am back with everything adhered down, including those colorful border stripes. And as you can see, they did take up some of that evenness. And then the very first block that caught my attention in the mood board was the kind of bokeh heart block in the bottom left corner. And I'm trying to decide how I want to interpret that. I had several ideas here. I did, I am picking out lots of bits and pieces from my embellishments. So I already picked out those bits and pieces from my embellishments so that you didn't have to see me go through all of the pile of stuff that was on my desk. So at any rate, I flipped over one of my little accordion hearts that I made myself. And if you haven't seen that video, I will link you up to that one as well. And the back side of that one actually had some color to it, which reminded me of those bokeh heart in the mood board. So I did set that there temporarily because the size of it, I'm just not sure about. And I've moved on to interpreting other blocks here. So I started with some florals up in that upper left corner to mimic the butterfly and the florals up there. And I want to balance it out with the lower right corner, which I'm working on right now. And because that one had text in it, I'm going to use that one as my title block. And I am building up a title with journaling bits here from my kit. I believe most of those pieces came out of a Jen Had-filled journaling ephemera set. So, and then I'm mixing up with the Prima chipboard and ephemera pieces. And as I'm embellishing each of these blocks, I'm trying to keep some of my general embellishing rules in mind, which is basically the rule of 3. So having 3 spots of elements to the embellishment is eye-pleasing. And I've got the butterfly, I've got the florals at the bottom, and then my third piece is actually a mixed up piece with a banner and a sentiment. So those are my little 3 elements for that one block up there. And if I take it step by step, thinking about each block that way, I can build up interesting clusters. I did have this additional banner piece that adds to the title and sentiment of this whole layout. Because there's no photos here, the words are making up more of the story than typical on these embellishments. So I'm trying to get those words in places that make sense. So here is where I switched over to changing up this heart bokeh effect. And I am recreating the bokeh effect with various sizes of puffy hearts. And I am trying to cascade them off the edge. And that is another thing about grid designs that I like to do. I like to break outside of the grid just a little bit. I think it adds a little movement and interest to grid layouts. There's nothing wrong with a very true, strict grid that's very magazine. It's got a very magazine vibe to it, which is beautiful on its own. But for me, when I'm doing layouts, I like to break outside of the grid just a little bit to give a little more organic feel to it, I guess is a good way to say it. All right, I put my little yoga lady chipboard sticker on there. And so for that block, the kind of 3 elements I'm thinking of, the cascading flowers helps bridge the gap between the upper block and that particular block. So that's working as one of my elements. I added a little journal tab there, and that's my 3rd element for that block. I did add another piece to that upper banner block there, and that is still using the rule of 3s for that particular element. So it's 3 elements with one of them being a grouping of 3 elements. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm just continuing to work on my blocks here, adding in these little journal tabs as I go, because each of these embellishment choices that I made, and I did grab that coffee cup from my stash because I didn't have anything in my kit this month, and I fussy cut it out. So each of these elements here, not only do they match the mood board, but they match things in my life that I am trying to pay attention to. And this whole layout is about mindfulness and paying attention to the small moments in life. It is so easy, and I've certainly done this, to just like check off that to-do list and get to the next thing and not slow down and take time to enjoy the moments that make up our daily life. And so as a self-care practice, I go through some mindfulness work, and it is work sometimes, because when we have a long checklist of things to do, it is really easy to get lost in the moment. So that is something I do for my self-care, and this month's kit is about self-care, and my kit in particular is about mindfulness, because that is the area of my self-care that I'm working on. So that is the theme of my kit, and all of these elements have something to do with that. All of the words have something to do with that, and then my journaling emphasizes that. And I did break away from the mood board a little bit by adding more journaling down in that bottom block. I think there were words in that upper block. I can't quite remember at this point. At any rate, I am feeling like I'm getting to the end of this. I have this little puffy sticker set that I'm going to add just tiny little bits here. I'm looking at areas of my groupings that maybe need a third thing, or they need a little bit of an element to break outside of the grid. So I'm looking for those little details that I want to do. And at first I thought I was going to leave some of these blocks unadorned, I guess is a good word, undecorated, to leave a little more breathing room. But in my typical fashion, I'm filling up more things that I intended. So this last block here is empty. And I think, what was that block? Oh, I can't quite remember. Oh, it was just a blue field of flowers. And so that one is feeling a little out of place amongst the other decorated blocks. So I am trying to decorate it up with just a stamp from my stamp set. And it's not going very well. I'm sure you've all had experiences with the stamping not turning out how you want. But what's nice about stamping on layouts is if you do it on a piece that you can remove, and I did attach all this with removable adhesive in case I needed to shift things around. I just trimmed down a new block and started over again. So that worked out fine. I got a little stamp on there to get it to match up with the rest of the words. There we go, on my layout. And now it is looking, it just has that one stamp on there. The little banner piece hanging onto it a little bit is kind of a third element. So I'm trying to balance out that block with another piece. And sometimes it can be a little tricky to find out what it needs. I thought this banner was gonna underline and highlight one of the words, and then I didn't like it. It felt too like it was drawing the eye too much more than the words were. And I try moving that banner around because I've already de-sticked it, and what do I do with it now that it's de-sticked? And I just stick it back on my sticker sheet. It might get lost later, but that is the thing that will happen. So I find, I thought I'd found it already. Oh, I'm going searching for it. I'm thinking adding a little more heart to here will help balance the hearts on the bottom. And this will be a very tiny element to be kind of that third spot on there. And that finishes up that block, and that finishes up the whole layout. So I do have some close-up photos coming up of this. If you have any thoughts on grid design, doing no photo layouts, any thoughts or questions, drop comments below and we can have a chat about that. I have lots of things lined up for the future, so I do hope you will come back to see my future videos. And until next time, I hope you have an artful day.